Greetings, I'm Ari. Today I want to share something that really hurts me. It hurts a lot, not only as a Jew living here in Israel, but also as a Colombian. These days, the president of my homeland Colombia, Gustavo Petro, once again did his thing at the United Nations with statements that are not only incendiary, but to be honest, they embarrass those of us who come from this country and know that his words do not represent the voice of the majority of Colombians. In his speech, Petro went so far as to invite the armies of the world to liberate Palestine, even mentioning that it is the time of the sword. And
I will step back here and speak in Colombia to open the list of Colombian men and women volunteers who want to go fight for the liberation of Palestine. And what if the President of the Republic of Colombia has to go to that fight?
I'm not scared. I've been in others before.
Well, I'll go.
But let's think for a moment about what it means for a president to say that. When he talks about uniting the armies, is he including his own country's army? Does Petro intend to make the Colombian army available for this cause? Can you imagine the soldiers of Colombia fighting shoulder to shoulder with the Hamas terrorists against the Israeli army in Gaza? The mere fact of suggesting something like that is extremely serious because these are not just random words. It's the voice of a head of state who, with his authority, gives legitimacy to a discourse of hate and war.
Colombia has returned. I'm going to open registrations for male and female volunteers with military experience, Colombian military experience, which is not just any kind. We have fought for centuries in the mountains against the Spanish, against invaders, among ourselves to change the world and sometimes to keep it from changing. Thank you. But that Colombian experience must be put at the service of the people of Palestine today because it means serving the people, serving humanity.
And it didn't stop there. He also accused President Donald Trump of being complicit in genocide and even urged American soldiers to disobey orders if it meant attacking civilians. Just consider how irresponsible these words are.
Trump not only lets missiles fall on young people in the Caribbean, not only imprisons and chains migrants, but also allows missiles to be launched against children, young people, women, and the elderly.
In Gaza,
he becomes complicit in genocide because it is genocide and we have to shout it over and over again. This chamber is a silent witness and accomplice to a genocide in today's world, when we thought it was only Hitler's doing. Trump doesn't talk about democracy. He doesn't talk about the climate crisis. He doesn't talk about life. He only threatens, kills, and lets tens of thousands be killed.
The result was immediate. The United States revoked Petro's visa, and this is no small thing. This isn't about a political whim, but a reaction to the speech of a head of state. Instead of representing his nation with dignity, he becomes an agitator who puts at risk not only international relations, but also the security of entire communities. And I say this very clearly as a Colombian, listening to this man speak in this way is a disgrace. Colombia has always had a historic and close relationship with Israel, with cooperation in agriculture, defense, and technology. Extremely important with everything Colombia has had to deal with regarding security issues. Two peoples who have respected each other and grown together. But with Petro in power, that relationship has been brutally fractured, something that has never been seen before. The most worrying thing is that what happened this week at the United Nations is not an isolated outburst. If we look back, we see a very clear pattern in the behavior of Gustavo Petro. Since October 2023, when he compared the siege of Gaza to Nazism and even said it was like an Auschwitz, he had already raised all the alarms. So much so that institutions like Yad Vashem publicly condemned him, accusing him of trivializing the Holocaust. For a president, using the memory of the extermination of 6 million Jews for political purposes is something that has no justification. After those statements, Israel took strong measures. It suspended military exports to Colombia, a direct blow to a relationship that had always been strategic. And far from calming things down, Petro responded by escalating even further, to the point of announcing the breaking of diplomatic relations in May. With that decision, he wiped out decades of cooperation, treaties, and bonds of friendship between Colombia and Israel in one fell swoop. But he didn't stop there. In June 2024, he started talking about suspending Colombian coal exports to Israel, threatening international companies and putting thousands of jobs in his own country at risk. And in April of this year, he appointed as Director of Religious Affairs a pseudo-rabbi who has nothing to do with the official rabbinate of Colombia, under the leadership of the most excellent Chief Rabbi of Colombia, Alfredo Goldschmidt. And to top it off, this new Director of Religious Affairs is known for his anti-Zionist stance, which further heightened tensions with the Jewish community of Colombia. It's as if Petro does everything on purpose. Well, he actually does everything on purpose. And we've reached the point where he's not only breaking off relations and cutting economic ties, but now the United Nations is openly calling for violence and for armies to unite against Israel. This is no longer foreign policy, this is incitement. The most delicate part of all this is that the words of a president don't just disappear into thin air. We're not talking about just any ordinary citizen. We're not even talking about a diplomat. We're talking about the great leader of a country. We're talking about the president. And this obviously has real consequences. Here, the Jewish community in Colombia is already feeling pressure. We're talking about between 5,000 and 6,000 Jews who live in different cities across the country. Many of them are families who have been there for generations. A community that has always been an active part of national life, contributing academically, culturally, and economically. And now they see how, from the very Casa de Nariño, speeches are being made that legitimize hatred against them. It's not an exaggeration. After his first comparisons with Nazism, in 2023, swastikas appeared painted on the facade of the Israeli embassy in Bogota. That kind of vandalism doesn't come out of nowhere. It's fueled by a climate that normalizes anti-Semitism. And when it's the president himself who gives the signal, the message that is sent is that attacking Jews is acceptable, that hating Israel is a duty. I should mention something that people in other countries may not know, and as a Colombian, I can confirm it. Colombia is a predominantly Christian country, both Catholic and evangelical, and a large part of those communities feel a deep sympathy for Israel. They have held sit-ins, vigils, and marches supporting the Jewish people on several occasions because they understand the spiritual and biblical bond that unites both nations. They understand that their faith, their creed, specifically Catholics, evangelicals, Christians, has a Judeo-Christian root. In other words, Petro is not only breaking diplomatic relations, he is also ignoring and disregarding the feelings of millions of Colombians who see Israel as an ally and a brotherly nation. This shows that he is stubbornly putting his personal stance, which is clearly anti-Jewish, above the millions of people he represents. That's why what Petro is doing not only damages Colombia's international image, but also sows internal division and puts his own people at risk. If you don't believe me, ask the people who are abroad so they can tell you what is being said about Colombia right now in those countries. A president who should be a guarantor of unity and respect ends up being the first to pour gasoline on the fire. What we are seeing with Petro is an ideological turn that betrays the history of Colombia. Because we have to remember, Colombia was one of the first countries to recognize the State of Israel in 1949, specifically in the month of February. And since then, the relationship had been characterized by cooperation and mutual respect. For decades, Colombia and Israel worked together in defense, in agriculture, in innovation. That bond was always driven by pride and in fact strengthened both peoples. Today, On the other hand, we have a president who not only breaks those ties, but also becomes a spokesperson for narratives that fuel hatred. And that, as a Colombian, honestly hurts and embarrasses me, because I know he doesn't represent the majority. I know it from my own experience because I've seen how it is in Colombia. There are thousands and thousands of Christians, Catholics, evangelicals who feel a deep love for Israel, who pray for Jerusalem, who defend the right of the Jewish people to exist in peace. Not to mention the thousands of Jews who wear the Colombian jersey simply because we were born there. That's why Petro's actions aren't just about foreign policy. They represent a break in values. Meanwhile, he's playing at being a revolutionary leader with incendiary speeches at the United Nations. What he's really doing is isolating Colombia, weakening its alliances, and most seriously, exposing his own Jewish citizens to the risk of being targeted by those who feed on the hatred he is spreading. The question is, what does Colombia gain from this? What is Petro seeking to achieve for Colombia with this? For Colombia's interests, how does losing historical allies and encouraging more anti-Semitism help? The truth is that Petro's words don't build anything at all. All they do is destroy. And that's where we have to be clear, as Colombians, as Jews, and as friends of Israel. We can't stay silent in the face of a president who confuses the voice of a people with his ideological delusions. In the end, what is clear is that Gustavo Petro's words do not represent Colombia nor Colombians, and even less the Jews who live in Colombia. They reflect his agenda and ideology, and a disregard for the history of friendship between two nations that have always walked together. As a Colombian Jew, I say this with pain. I feel ashamed that the one who holds the presidency speaks on behalf of the country with a speech that only generates hatred. But at the same time, I am certain that millions of Colombians do not think like him. Those who value Israel and can distinguish justice from political manipulation. In fact, maybe you who are watching me right now are one of those millions of Colombians who support Israel. And I invite you to leave your comment to make it visible, because the voice of the people carries much more weight than the delusions of a president. What Petro said at the United Nations is serious because these are not just random phrases. When a president calls on an army and incites violence, he is opening doors that can bring real consequences, both for Colombia's image in the world and for the safety of the Jewish community in the country itself. That is the responsibility that many seem to forget. Words can ignite fires that are later impossible to put out. And that's why it's so important that we talk about this, that we don't stay silent, because staying silent would mean accepting that hate has the last word, and I know that's not the case. Before I say goodbye, I want to extend an invitation. I've seen in the comments that some of you say you haven't been able to subscribe to the channel, either because you can't or you can't find the subscribe button. Check it to see if the same thing is happening to you. Make sure you're subscribed and that the notification bell is turned on. Remember that memberships are also available, which give you access to the private news group on WhatsApp, where we share exclusive updates about Israel and global events related to the region. Give us a like before you go. See you.